Yes, it's the world this week, 7 days, 4 Paris-based correspondents, 1 hour. We are in the company of Christopher Dickey, foreign editor of the Daily Beast. How are you, sir?
Great to be here.
Great to have you. Great to have as well Hamdan Mostafavi, editor-in-chief of the website of Courrier International, which is gives you weekly publication, gives you the best of the world's press.
Every day on our new website, if I can say.
And the best every day.
Very nice new website. I invite you to go and see it.
We shall. All right. We're also joined by Claude Guibal, senior correspondent at France Culture, public radio station, who's been chalking up the air miles of late. We'll talk about that in a bit. And Louis Magloire-Comayou, who chairs the African Press Club here in Paris, the... what's the exact name of it?
African Information Club.
The African Information Club. Thank you, sir. The World This Week, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, our hashtag F24Debate. It's only a framework agreement, and yet... In Tehran, overnight celebrations greeting news that marathon negotiations had led to a breakthrough in curbing Iran's nuclear ambitions in exchange for the lifting of sanctions. Those noisy scenes, as you can see, replicated this Friday with the hero's welcome for Foreign Minister Javad Zarif upon his return from the banks of Lake Geneva, where negotiators announced guidelines for a final June 30th deal. Hamdan Mostafavi, what was your thoughts when you saw what was in that first press statement in Lausanne on Thursday?
Well, I was very happy as an Iranian myself, as every Iranian in the world, I think, has followed this negotiation with much attention. And we were happy to see that agreement, even if I will tell you after why it could fail, but I want first to focus on why it could work, actually, and I think the first most important thing is the Iranian people that you have seen in the street that really were hoping for that. That's why they elected Rouhani, that's what they've been wanting for a long time. They're tired of isolation, they're tired of sanctions, and they are really willing to make this work. So I think the pressure of the people can help. But of course, the most important thing is also the Iranian government, who wants now to push in the past this nuclear problem and now be a key player in the region and in the world. So they're working very hard to make that work. So it's a great news, even if you think that it took a year and a half and 8 days of intense negotiation just to get to a framework. So, of course, there are many, many things that can make...
Many hurdles, and we'll pick up on that with our panel. But let me ask you, who are those people that we saw celebrating there? Are they sort of the elites of Tehran, or are they...
No, I think I talked to some people in Tehran, and they told me that most people, everybody, young people were in the street, families, and it was like, you know... Iranians, they take every opportunity to go and celebrate, like when there's a football victory or when there's a good news. I mean, it's and this time it's a good news that's permitted by the regime, so it's even more reason to go out and celebrate. So I think it's quite representative of really what, it's not a stage or in any way. I think really it's what people feel like.
Christopher Dickey, you penned a piece in which you carefully spelled out all that could go wrong. But when you hear about the momentum, do you doubt that?
Well, you know, I think as I was listening to Javad Zarif talk to the press, when was it? Just yesterday. The way he presented the lifting of sanctions was pretty disingenuous. He sort of went, as soon as we finish completing all the requirements, the sanctions will be lifted. And so he sort of slid by that first part. But fulfilling all the requirements is going to be very difficult and very problematic for a lot of people in the Iranian regime, especially in the Revolutionary Guard Corps and in the military, because it requires a level of intrusive inspections into their affairs that they have never allowed before and that they probably will not want to allow now. And that's just one issue.
Those UN nuclear inspectors are pretty tough.
Well, they're very tough and they're very good. but and Iran supposedly is going to implement the additional protocol to the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is an important thing because it gives the inspectors more leeway. But it doesn't give them no-notice inspection anywhere that they want to go anytime. And I think that there are going to be a lot of problems implementing that over time.
All right, Claude Guibal, I have a question for you. Are you good with names and faces? Because we've stumbled on a picture, and we're trying to work out who it is. Yeah, there it is there. Can you tell us what this is all about?
You're very good at it. Yeah, I was in Tehran not long ago, actually, last month. And that's why I understand why people were so joyful yesterday in the streets of Tehran. And I agree with Hamdan Mustafavi. I'm not sure it's just an elite, because most of the people were suffering so much from this sanction. I mean, sanction is a key word in Iran these days. But, well, as you said, it doesn't mean that the deal is done and that everything is settled.
They were celebrating as if they thought sanctions would be lifted tomorrow, and they're not even going to be lifted in June.
People need a sign. It's a matter of trust. And the thing is, let's take it the other way around. What could have happened if there were a status quo? It would have been a big problem. I mean, sanctions have not prevented Iran to carry on its nuclear program. So what else? Bombing Iran? Adding another front, another war in the region? When Iran is a key player, when the Iranian influence is very strong in now 3 Arab capitals in the Middle East, when you have Damascus, when you have Baghdad, and when you have now Sana'a. No, I mean, this was a sign everybody was waiting for, and it happened at last.
You have to think how all of this started, like 12 years ago. Iran was in the axis of evil. It was, Europe wanted Iran to stop to enrich the uranium, just to start discussing. Now they can keep with the enrichment. So there are some victories for Iran, even if, of course, the question of sanctions and the way we just heard Rouhani presenting the deal on TV and the way Zarif presented, it's of course a problem because the sanctions will take time to be lifted, and they are so intertwined. The sanctions about the petrol, the oil, the sanctions about also promoting terrorism. I mean, there are some of the American sanctions that are about that, so it's going to be harder to.
Looking back on it, Louis Magras-Comayou, have sanctions made the world a safer place or a more dangerous place?
No, I can't say. Since the end of the Cold War, we are talking about normalization. There are several things which have been made in that way, but I don't think it has become safer to live in our world now. The only fact I can add is that Africa is not a key player in this deal. But the fact is, in a certain time, they were asking, for example, Niger, who is a big Iranian producer, not to sell it to the bad countries. And I don't know if that will permit them to develop the uranium or the productivity in the country. But when you look at what the French companies, I'm going out of the subject, I know that, but when you see what is going on in Niger, who is a big producer of uranium, but where you can't find any electricity to sustain the development of the industries in the country, it looks something very disgraceful, simply. And I think before talking about the nuclear weapon, we should think also of the well-being of the people living in those countries, not talking only about sanctions, talking simply about benefiting of the progress that can be made with those extraction products.
Speaking of French companies, Claude Guibal, Christopher Dickey was saying, we shouldn't act as though this is a done deal. But this morning I was listening to the radio, and almost the second report was, when is companies like Peugeot and Total going to be able to get back in? They were talking as if this was going to be a great economic boondoggle.
Well, actually, what Iranian people say is, come on, French, what are you waiting for? Italians are already there. Americans are also looking at us, I mean, I think there is a strong will. I mean, Amdad Mustafavi knows better than I know, but there is a strong willing from the Iranian economic and businesses for the French business. And I mean, French businessmen as well are looking very closely to Iran. I mean, it's a major market for us, I mean, for France. But the green light still not here, I think. And,
but Peugeot was a big player in Iran. I mean, everybody has this Peugeot.
Everybody has a Peugeot.
It's really, and they're really eager for France to come back.
Well, I think that, I mean, the big picture of this, and Obama talks about this, he talked about this yesterday, is does Iran want to be welcomed back into the community of nations? That's really the big question. It's not just sanctions, it's not just the nuclear program. It's, are you going to play with the big boys on their own terms and under the rule of law, dropping terrorism and pursuing policies that are about economic development and more democratic freedoms. That's really what the people of Iran want.
Yeah, and that's why Iran is ready to make some concessions, because they want to
that's
get
what
back.
that's what the people turned out on the streets for in 2009, and they were crushed.
the question is, who's in charge in Iran?
So who's in charge? And that really is what it comes down to again and again. With Iran and with negotiations with Iran, who's in charge? Who are you talking to?
And
who's making the deal?
And who's going to be in charge? The Supreme Leader is 75 years old and has had operations for prostate cancer in the past.
Yeah, and this deal is supposed to last 10 years. I mean, more than 10
and 15 in
years.
parts, yeah.
Many things can change in these 10 or 15 years.
All right, Israel's prime minister warns the deal threatens the very existence of his state. Benjamin Netanyahu, earlier this week, welcomed to Jerusalem the most powerful man on Capitol Hill, Republican House Speaker John Boehner, a clear reminder that Barack Obama's biggest obstacle may be right down the street on Pennsylvania Avenue.
Where states are imploding. If Congress kills this deal, not based on expert analysis and without offering any reasonable alternative, then it's the United States that will be blamed for the failure of diplomacy. International unity will collapse, and the path to conflict will widen.
The terms announced today are not as bad as I had feared. They're much worse. The only acceptable deal would be Iran's nuclear disarmament.
Right.
Christopher Dickey.
Right. How's he going to get that? What does he plan to do to achieve that? It's so easy for some jerk like Cotton on the Hill to talk that way when he's really talking about going to war and killing thousands and thousands of people, including a lot of Americans. That's what got us into the war in Iraq. The logic behind people like Cotton, when they say that kind of thing, is exactly the kind of logic that got us into Iraq and the war that's still not over.
There was a poll earlier this week that said 59% of Americans were in favor of a deal, even if they thought it wouldn't necessarily be effective. Why is it then that there really is this threat that Congress could scuttle the agreement?
Well, partly because a lot of the people in Congress are basically following the line and the policies that are set by Netanyahu. The way the Congress works is not a lot of people in Congress are really terribly devoted to foreign policy issues. They listen to people who are really committed to single issues and who really push them very hard. And the Israelis do that, and people like Netanyahu do that very effectively. They go home to their constituents. Do you think Cotton's constituents in his home state really care a lot about Iranian politics? No. But he can toe that line, get political credit for it, and pursue it in a way that will work to his political benefit within the Republican Party. So that's what he does. That's why those guys should not be making foreign policy. But that is what they are insisting they should be doing.
And with the terms of Thursday evening, have they been contained, shall we say, until June the 30th?
Well, I think it helps Obama that the deal is so detailed, although already they're trying to pick it apart line by line to the extent that those lines are known. But I think that Obama made really what was almost an impeccable speech yesterday. He laid out all the reasons that he had pursued this deal and the way he pursued it. And at the end of the day, people in the United States do not want to go to war again. And if he keeps hitting that point, it's this or war, the people of the United States will side with him and not with the warmongers.
Hamdan Mustafavi, there's a presidential election in the U.S. in 2016.
Yeah, that could be one of the things that make this deal go wrong, because we don't know who's going to come there and if this deal is made, how it's going to go on. And in Iran too, the power can change, any time. But I think there are some changes. When you saw, I don't know if you saw that on the internet today, Iranian people taking their picture with Obama on the TV. That was the first time you saw an American president.
People apparently waving dollar bills in the streets of Tehran.
There are not so many of those in Iran now, but I think,
They took them framed off the wall.
No, you can't go back. I don't think. I think the way we went these last few years, it's still a good thing.
Claude Guibal, the Tehran that you found, was it what you expected this time around?
I don't know what was I expecting, but it was actually really interesting to talk to people. As you say, people in Iran. Most of them don't like the image of Iran, which is shown abroad. Iran is a very nationalistic country, very proud of its civilization, thinks that he has the right to have nuclear power, and doesn't see why they could be prevented from it, because they said we are a peaceful country, we have not attacked any country. What was interesting for me, actually, to see in Iran was the weight of the revolution first, and of the war, the Iran-Iraq war, and that explained a lot of things about this country and about the fact that most of the people are looking for something else, for a new era. And also what was interesting is to see the real percentage of the radicals in the society, which is around, I would say, like 15 or 20% of the population, roughly. That is obviously a very interesting country, really well-educated country, and it's, whether you like it or not, a major key player not only in the Middle East, but in the world.
Around the world. Yeah. Final point.
Final word is that Iran wants to go now beyond this nuclear deal, because you said they have this presence in Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Bahrain. They are trying to do what Khomeini told them to do, which is to export the revolution. So now the nuclear issue is something they want to put aside to go on their...
Well, but all of that compromises the nuclear agreement. All of that makes it infinitely more difficult to pursue the nuclear agreement.
All right, so which way it'll go is a matter of debate. Stay with us. There's much more to come here. You're watching The World This Week.